Evan arrived in the alien town just before nightfall, the sky turning dark purple as two moons rose slowly. He was a traveler and a mechanic who moved from world to world, fixing whatever machine he found and earning enough credits to survive. He never planned to stay anywhere for long, and he never expected trouble. But trouble sometimes found him anyway. The town was quiet and strangely tense, almost like everyone was scared of something unseen. Shopkeepers locked doors early, lights dimmed fast, and the streets emptied as if a storm was coming. Evan felt that strange heaviness the moment he walked in. But he continued forward because he only needed water and a place to sleep. He entered a small repair shop where local workers fixed tools and air pumps. The moment he stepped inside, he noticed her. A young alien girl working in the corner. Her name was Rila. He learned that later. For now he only saw a thin girl with bright silver eyes that never looked up. She moved as if she was trying to disappear into the shadows, her arms covered by long cloth even though the air was warm, her shoulders slightly shaking as she polished a broken engine plate. Evan nodded to her and gave a small friendly smile. She blinked and quickly looked down. Almost frightened of being seen, it felt strange to him. She acted like someone who had learned to stay silent and hidden. He placed his tool bag on the counter and spoke gently to the shop owner. The owner barely answered, eyes darting outside as if expecting someone dangerous to walk in at any moment. The whole town acted scared, and Evan had no idea why. He decided to finish his business quickly and leave the next morning. When Rila moved from her workbench to bring a part to the front, her sleeve slipped for a moment. It happened so fast she did not notice. But Evan did. He saw the mark she tried to hide. 3 long burn marks on her arm shaped like claws. The skin looked old and new at the same time, as if someone kept hurting the same place again and again. Rila froze when she realized her sleeve had moved. She quickly pulled the cloth back and hid her arm behind her body. Her breathing turned fast, her eyes filled with fear so sharp it made Evan pause. He raised his hands gently to show he meant no harm and said softly that he was not judging her. But she stepped back and shook her head, whispering so quietly he almost missed the words. "Please do not tell anyone." Her voice carried pure fear. Not embarrassment, fear. Evan understood something serious was behind those marks. Something much bigger than a simple injury. He wanted to ask who hurt her. But the shop owner glared and shook his head, silently warning Evan not to get involved. Evan paid for the parts he needed and stepped outside. But he could not forget the girl's terrified face, the marks on her arm, and the way the entire shop had reacted. He walked slowly down the street, trying to understand this strange town. People peeked through windows and then hid. Mothers pulled children inside. Shop signs turned off one by one. It felt like the whole place lived under a shadow that had nothing to do with the setting suns. Then he heard footsteps, heavy and slow, echoing across the stone road. Every person outside dropped to their knees instantly. Evan did not understand why until he saw the figure approaching. A massive creature covered in dark red scales with glowing eyes and long horns. He walked like a king and a monster at the same time. This was Drakkar, the leader of the Dragon Gang, the most feared group on this side of the galaxy. Evan could feel heat around him, even from far away. Drakkar's gaze swept across the street, and people trembled. But the moment he saw Rila inside the shop window, he stopped walking, his eyes narrowed. Evan noticed how Rila froze, her hands shaking hard. She tried to hide behind a shelf, but Drakkar's eyes locked on the movement. Evan felt a shiver run down his spine. He could see something dangerous building in the air. Something that was about to explode. Rila stepped outside slowly, her head lowered, her sleeves pulled tight. Evan stood nearby, not sure if he should leave or stay. Drakkar looked at her arm, and his jaw clenched. The ground seemed to vibrate with his suppressed anger. Evan did not know what was happening. but he knew one thing clearly. The marks on her arm were not a secret anymore. This was the moment her hidden pain was exposed. This was the moment everything in her life began to change. And Evan had a feeling his own life was about to be pulled into the same storm. The moment Drakkar stopped walking, the entire street turned silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as his red eyes focused on Rila. She stood by the shop door with her head down and her hands shaking badly. She looked like someone waiting for punishment, not protection. Evan watched from only a few steps away and felt something heavy in the air, something dangerous and unpredictable. He did not understand the full story, but he could sense fear moving like a shadow behind every door and window. Drakkar stepped forward slowly, his huge clawed feet making a deep sound with each step. People bowed even lower, some pressed their faces to the ground. No one dared to breathe loudly. The dragon gang leader was known for destroying whole towns if he felt insulted. He was known for fighting armies alone, but Evan saw something strange in his expression now. Drakkar was not looking at Rila with anger. He was looking at her with a storm in his eyes, a storm aimed at someone else. Rila still kept her arm hidden under the cloth, but Drakkar had already seen the marks. His jaw tightened and a low growl came from his chest. The road seemed to shake with it. Rila whispered something, but her voice was too soft for anyone to hear. Her eyes were shiny as if she might cry. Evan felt his heart twist a little because he had seen fear before, but this was something deeper. Like she was terrified of losing something more important than her life. Drakkar lowered his head and looked directly at her. His voice came out deep and slow. "Who did this to you?" The question spread through the street like fire. People gasped quietly. Someone dropped a basket, and it rolled across the ground without anyone daring to pick it up. The whole town had seen Drakkar angry before. But this was different. This was quiet anger. The kind that turned deadly faster than fire. Rila shook her head quickly and whispered that it was nothing, but Drakkar's expression darkened more. He raised his hand slowly, and Evan thought he was about to explode his fire breath on the street. But instead he pointed to her sleeve. "Show me." His voice was softer but more dangerous than before. The kind of voice that promised destruction. Rila froze. She looked like a small child in front of a storm. She knew she could not refuse him. Her fingers trembled as she pulled up the cloth, revealing the claw-shaped burn marks again. The crowd looked away because no one wanted to witness Drakkar's reaction. Evan felt his stomach tighten. He hated seeing the marks. They were cruel and deep. Someone had hurt her again and again. Someone had enjoyed hurting her. Drakkar went completely still. His eyes turned darker, almost black. His chest rose slowly as if he was holding back a fire big enough to burn the entire sky. Evan stepped back without thinking because he could feel heat rising around them. Drakkar whispered one sentence, very gently. "Who dared to touch what is mine?" The crowd trembled. Rila dropped to her knees and begged him not to get angry. She said it was her fault that she got caught, that she should have been faster, that she did not want trouble. Evan finally understood. These were not marks from Drakkar. They were marks from someone else, someone Drakkar hated. Someone who had crossed a deadly line. Drakkar reached out slowly and lifted Rila's chin with one claw. She closed her eyes as if expecting death, but Drakkar only stared at her with something heavy in his eyes. Something like guilt or regret. He whispered that she should have told him. That he would have protected her, that no one had the right to harm her. Then Drakkar's gaze moved to Evan. Everyone around them stopped breathing. Evan did not know what he had done, but Drakkar's eyes studied him in a strange way. Not with anger, not with suspicion. Almost with curiosity, Drakkar asked him in a deep voice. "You saw the marks first." Evan swallowed and nodded slowly. Drakkar asked again. "And you did nothing to hurt her?" Evan replied quietly that she needed help, not fear. The words came out before he could stop himself. There was a long silence as the dragon gang leader stared at the human who stood there with nothing but courage in his eyes. The crowd expected Drakkar to crush him. But instead Drakkar nodded once, slowly, strangely respectful. Rila opened her eyes in surprise. Something had shifted in that moment. Something big. Evan felt it too. He did not know what future waited for him. But he knew the storm around Rila was getting bigger. And now he was part of it. Without meaning to, Rila stayed on her knees with her head down, her hands trembling so much she almost dropped her sleeve again. Evan stood a few feet away, unsure if he should step back or step forward. Every instinct in his body told him to stay quiet. But something else inside him whispered that silence was the reason Rila had suffered for so long. Drakkar stood between them like a tower of living fire, his deep voice rumbling through the empty street. He said one line that shocked everyone around them. "Stand up, girl, you are not alone anymore." Rila lifted her head slowly, her silver eyes full of tears. She had lived her whole life believing she was nothing, a tool for work, a shadow no one cared about. Hearing those words from the most feared being in the region made her body shake even more. Evan saw the way she looked at Drakkar, not with fear but with confusion. Like she did not understand why someone so powerful cared about someone so small. The crowd watched with wide eyes, everyone expecting chaos, destruction, fire, anything. But the next moment was even stranger. Drakkar turned his head slowly toward Evan. For the first time, Evan felt real heat spreading across the ground, not burning him but warning him. Drakkar's eyes glowed brighter as he studied the human standing there, without armor, without weapons, without any plan. Evan felt like he was standing in front of a mountain that could talk. Drakkar lowered his voice and asked him quietly, "Why did you protect her?" The question was simple, but the weight behind it felt heavy enough to crush stone. Evan looked at Rila for a second before answering. He did not think about bravery or fear. He just spoke from his heart. Because she looked scared, because she was hurt, because no one else was helping her, so I did. His words echoed across the silent town, and for the first time people looked at him with something other than confusion. Some saw respect, others saw danger, because anyone who caught Drakkar's attention usually did not live long. Drakkar's expression changed in a way Evan could not understand. The fearsome gang leader stared at him with something that almost looked like approval. Then he said the last thing anyone expected. "You stepped forward when even my warriors did not." The crowd gasped silently. Warriors from the Dragon Gang looked at each other nervously. None of them liked hearing that a human had done something braver than them. Rila looked at Evan with surprise and something soft in her eyes. Something that made Evan's chest tighten a little. Then the ground shook suddenly as someone ran through the alley. A guard from Drakkar's gang rushed forward and knelt, his voice shaking as he delivered news that made the entire street freeze. "They are coming back, the ones who hurt her. The ones who left their marks. They are close, my lord." Rila grabbed her sleeve in fear, her breath turning shallow. Evan felt the air change instantly, like the whole town took a step backward at the same time. Drakkar's claws scraped the ground gently, not out of anger, but out of control. The kind of control that comes right before a storm breaks loose. His voice was calm but deadly, where the guard pointed toward the eastern hill. Only minutes away, every citizen hid immediately. Doors slammed shut so fast the sound echoed like thunder. Warriors began forming a line, their armor glowing with red marks. Preparing for a fight, Drakkar looked down at Rila again. But this time his expression softened only for a whisper of a second. Evan saw it. The brief moment when Drakkar looked less like a monster and more like someone who regretted not protecting her sooner. Then Drakkar turned to Evan and said something that felt impossible. "Stay with her." Those words hit Evan like a blow. Him, a human with nothing but a tool bag, was being ordered by the most feared gang leader to guard someone precious. Rila looked at Evan with wide eyes, surprised and unsure. Evan felt nerves crawl up his spine. Everything inside him told him he was not ready for this. But something else inside whispered that walking away was impossible now. Drakkar moved past them like a living wall of fire and shouted orders to his warriors. "Prepare for war, no one touches her again, not one breath, no one." The warriors roared back, the sound shaking dust from the rooftops. Rila stepped closer to Evan, whispering that he should leave before things turned deadly. She said humans did not survive battles between alien gangs. Evan looked at her arm, remembering the mark she tried so hard to hide. Remembering her shaking voice when she begged him not to tell anyone. He took a slow breath and whispered back, "I am not leaving you." Her eyes widened a little as she stared at him, like she had never heard someone say such words to her before. The street glowed red from the fire rising in Drakkar's hands as he prepared to face the enemy who had hurt the girl he called his own. Evan stood beside Rila with no armor and no weapon. Only courage he did not know he had, but the night was far from over. The enemy was coming, and Evan was about to learn that stepping forward once meant stepping forward forever. Rila could not stop shaking as the distant sound of footsteps and engines grew louder from the eastern hill. Each thud felt like a memory returning to her. Each vibration in the air felt like pain waking up again. Evan stood beside her, watching her breathe fast and shallow. Her hands holding her sleeves tightly. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the ground, but also like she was trying to stay strong. Drakkar's warriors formed a wall of living fire in front of them, preparing for a battle that would paint the whole night red. Evan wanted to say something to calm her, but no words came. He was a human mechanic with no training. No weapon, no protection, yet he could not walk away. Not after what he had seen, and not after how she looked at him. Like he was the first person who ever treated her like someone worth protecting. Rila whispered that she never wanted anyone to get hurt because of her, her voice soft and full of guilt. She said the rival gang only came back because they wanted to punish her again for refusing to spy for them. She said she should have stayed hidden so no one would suffer. Evan shook his head slowly and told her that no one should suffer alone. That someone hurting her was not her fault. His words made her eyes shine again. Not just with fear, but with a kind of disbelief. Like she was hearing a truth she had never allowed herself to believe before. She opened her mouth to answer, but the ground suddenly trembled harder. The sound of engines grew louder, brighter lights appeared over the hill. And the enemy gang finally stepped into view. They were known as the Ashskar clan. A violent group who liked to leave burn marks on their victims, marks shaped like claws. The same marks that scarred Rila's arm, their leader. A tall alien with iron-gray skin and glowing red scars across his chest stepped forward with a cruel smile. He shouted loudly that he had come to take back what belonged to him. His voice echoed through the town like poison spreading through the air. The Ashskar warriors roared behind him, beating their weapons against metal shields to show their strength. Rila flinched and Evan stepped a little closer, ready to shield her if he had to. Drakkar finally stepped forward from his warriors, flames swirling around his arms like living snakes. His roar shook the entire street as he shouted back that Rila belonged to no one but herself. The air burned with heat and fury. Drakkar's eyes glowed with rage that could destroy mountains. The Ashskar leader laughed and pointed at Rila, saying she was weak and useless, saying she had failed them, saying she deserved every mark they gave her. Rila's breath caught and her knees weakened. Evan clenched his fists tightly. He felt anger rise inside him. Anger he did not know he could feel. He looked at Drakkar and could see the same anger, but 1,000 times stronger. Drakkar raised one clawed hand and the ground cracked under his feet. He shouted that anyone who dared touch her again would be turned to ash before morning. The Ashskar clan did not retreat. Instead, they charged forward with a scream that tore through the sky. The first clash exploded like a storm. Fire against metal, claws against blades. Warriors screaming as heat and sparks filled the night. Drakkar moved like a living comet. each strike from him sending enemies flying across the street. The Ashskar leader attacked him directly, their clash lighting the road with bursts of red and gold. Evan grabbed Rila's hand and pulled her back into a small corner to keep her safe. She tried to refuse, saying he should save himself. But Evan held her hand firmly and told her he would not let go. Suddenly, an Ashskar fighter broke through the line and rushed straight toward them. Evan's heart stopped. He had nothing but a metal wrench from his bag. Rila gasped in fear. The fighter raised his burning blade. But before he could reach them, a massive shadow fell over his body. Drakkar slammed the attacker into the ground with a blow that shook dust from rooftops. He placed himself between Rila and the danger like a wall made of fire and fury. He roared at the Ashskar clan that Rila was under his protection, and anyone who tried reaching her would die first. Rila stared at Drakkar with wide eyes, then looked at Evan. Tears forming again, but this time mixed with something new. Something like hope or safety, something she had almost forgotten existed. Evan felt the heat of battle around them. Screams mixing with fire, shadows mixing with light. But he stayed beside her, refusing to move even when danger came close. Because he knew one thing clearly now. He was part of this whether he wanted it or not. And he was not going to run. The battle raged on. And the truth she never wanted revealed was unfolding right in front of her. She was not a burden. She was not alone. And two beings, one human and one monster feared across galaxies, had both stepped forward for her. And this was only the beginning of how her fate would change. The street burned with red and gold light as the battle grew fiercer. Drakkar fought like a living storm of fire, each movement sending heat waves through the air, every strike shaking the stone under his feet. The Ashskar clan kept charging, refusing to fall back, their leader shouting orders with a cruel grin. He wanted Rila. He wanted to break her again. He wanted to prove she was still his tool, his property. Evan felt anger twist inside him every time the enemy shouted her name like she was an object. Rila hid behind a broken cart with Evan beside her. The sound of blades hitting shields and fire burning through metal echoed around them. She had never seen Drakkar fight for her like this. She had never seen anyone fight for her at all. Her chest hurt from the weight of it, from the realization that she was not worthless the way the Ashskar clan had told her again and again. Evan crouched close to her and whispered that he would protect her. She shook her head and whispered back that he was only human, that he would get hurt, but Evan did not move. He said he would rather get hurt than leave her alone. Drakkar roared as another enemy tried to rush toward them. He leaped forward and crashed into the attacker, claws glowing like molten metal. The blow sent sparks exploding in every direction. The Ashskar leader laughed, calling Drakkar a beast pretending to be a guardian. He shouted that Rila was weak, that she was nothing, and that she would always belong to him. The words cut deeper than any weapon. Rila grabbed her sleeve tightly, fear filling her eyes again. But this time something else sparked in her too. Anger mixed with shame, pain mixed with exhaustion. She whispered that she was tired of being hurt, tired of being afraid, tired of hiding. Evan turned to her gently and said she was not weak. He told her she survived something many others would not have survived. He told her she was stronger than she realized. His voice carried warmth she had never felt before. Warmth that pushed away the poison words the Ashskar leader had planted in her mind. The Ashskar clan suddenly pushed forward with a new formation. Acting as if they found an opening, Drakkar growled and raised his flames higher. But Evan noticed something strange. A group of 5 Ashskar fighters were not attacking Drakkar at all. They were circling the side, heading straight for Rila. Evan stepped in front of her without thinking. His heart racing, his hands sweating. He only had a wrench, but he lifted it anyway. Ready to fight even though he knew he had no chance against trained killers with burning blades. Rila gasped and tried to pull him back, but Evan held his ground. The first Ashskar fighter lunged forward. Evan swung his wrench with all his strength. The loud clang of metal hitting metal echoed through the street. The impact pushed him back. Pain shot through his arm, but he did not fall. He stepped forward again, blocking another strike. The Ashkar fighter snarled in frustration. He had expected Evan to run, to scream, to beg. But Evan fought like someone who had decided he would die before letting them touch her. 2 more fighters joined the attack. Closing in dangerously, Rila screamed Evan's name. Fear ripping through her voice. But before the blades could reach him, a giant shadow fell across the fighters. Drakkar roared loud enough to shake dust from roofs and crashed into the group with unstoppable force. His claws sliced through their weapons. His fiery breath burned a wall behind them. He looked at Evan with a mixture of shock and disbelief. No human had ever stood up to alien killers like that. Not for a girl he barely knew, Drakkar shouted to Evan. "Get her out of here, protect her." The words felt unreal. The most feared gang leader trusting a human with something priceless. Evan nodded quickly and grabbed Rila's hand. Pulling her behind the line of burning debris for safety, Rila looked at him with tears in her eyes. She whispered, "Why would you do that for me?" Evan breathed hard, but managed to answer. "Because you deserve someone to stand for you." For a moment, the noise of battle faded around her. Those words hit her deeper than any scar ever had. She had lived so long believing she was worthless. Now 2 people were fighting for her, risking their lives for her. She felt something warm swelling in her chest, something fragile but powerful. Something she never allowed herself to feel before. The Ashkar leader saw them moving away and roared in rage. He charged forward with fire burning from his fists. Pushing aside his own warriors, he wanted Rila back no matter what. Drakkar saw him coming and stepped in front of him. The 2 leaders clashed again with explosive force. The sky lighting up as fire met fire, their roars shaking the night. Evan pulled Rila into an abandoned house at the edge of the street. But the wall shook as the leaders fought outside. Rila looked out the broken window, watching Drakkar risk everything for her. Watching Evan stand beside her like a shield. She whispered that she never wanted any of this. That she never asked for protection, never asked to be special. Evan looked at her softly and answered, "You did not ask, but you deserve it." Outside the battle raged. Inside her heart changed. And the night that began with fear was turning into something else. Something that would transform her fate forever. The abandoned house trembled like it was alive as the battle outside grew louder. Each strike from Drakkar and the Ashkar leader made the walls shake. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the wooden floor vibrated under Evan's feet. Rila stood near the cracked window, her hands pressed together tightly. Her eyes wide with fear and confusion, she watched the flames outside twist and spark like angry dragons in the night sky. She had never seen Drakkar fight with such fury, and she had never seen anyone risk their life for her the way Evan just did. Evan stayed close to her, breathing hard, his arm sore from blocking attacks with only a wrench. He glanced at Rila and saw her shaking again. Not from fear alone, but from something deeper. Something that looked like guilt, anger, and disbelief all mixed together. He whispered gently that she was safe for now. But she shook her head quickly, saying nothing was safe. Not while the Ashkar clan was still alive. She whispered that they would never stop chasing her. Not until she was dead or broken again. Evan stepped closer and placed a hand on her shoulder. His touch light but steady, he told her she was not alone anymore. That she had people fighting for her, that she was not the helpless girl they thought she was. Rila's lips trembled as she whispered that she did not understand why anyone would fight for someone like her. Someone who always caused trouble, someone who only knew how to hide. Evan shook his head and told her that hiding to survive did not make her weak. It made her strong, stronger than she realized. Before she could answer, a loud crash shattered the front of the house and both of them jumped. A glowing blade cut through the wall like it was made of paper. An ash scar fighter stepped through the opening with fire dripping from his armor. He grinned when he saw Rila, calling her little failure, calling her property, calling her the coward who tried to run. Rila stumbled backward, memories flooding her like cold water. Evan grabbed the wrench again, even though his hand was shaking. He stepped between the fighter and the girl he promised to protect. The fighter laughed at him, calling him a soft human, calling him weak, calling him useless, but Evan did not move aside. He swung the wrench with everything he had. The fighter blocked it easily and pushed Evan back into the wall. Pain shot up Evan's spine, but he refused to fall. He charged forward again, swinging, blocking, pushing, doing anything to keep the fighter's attention away from Rila. The fighter grew annoyed and slammed Evan to the ground. Raising his blade, Rila screamed and rushed forward without thinking. She grabbed a broken wooden beam from the floor and smashed it against the fighter's arm with surprising force. The fighter stumbled back in shock, turning toward her with rage. Rila shook, but she did not drop the beam. She lifted it again, and something in her eyes changed. They were not just scared anymore. They were fierce, alive, refusing to break again. The fighter snarled and stepped toward her, but before he could reach her, a massive roar shook the entire street. The wall behind him exploded outward, and Drakkar stormed inside like a burning meteor. Drakkar's claws grabbed the fighter by the throat and threw him through the window with such force the glass shattered into glowing dust. He turned to Rila immediately, scanning her from head to toe with wild panic in his eyes. When he saw she was unhurt, a heavy breath escaped him, almost like relief. Then he turned to Evan, who was trying to stand despite the pain. Drakkar's gaze locked onto the human for a long moment, and something changed in his expression. Something like respect, something rare and dangerous. But there was no time to speak. Outside, the Ashkar leader roared with rage, calling Drakkar a traitor to the old laws, calling Rila a worthless creature, calling Evan a weak insect who needed to be crushed. The insults echoed through the night, and Rila's knees shook again. She whispered that the Ashkar leader would never stop, that he would destroy the town just to punish her. Drakkar lowered himself to her level, his voice unbelievably gentle as he told her she was not a burden. She was not a curse, she was someone worth fighting for. Outside, the sky burned brighter as the Ashkar leader summoned all of his power. Flames rising around him like wings, Drakkar stood up straight, fire swirling around his arms again. But before stepping outside, he looked at Evan, his voice deep and commanding as he said, "Keep her close, your courage is not small, human." Evan nodded, swallowing hard. He stood beside Rila and promised her again that he would not leave. The house shook as Drakkar left to face the enemy leader. Their clash outside sounded like thunder tearing the sky apart. Rila clutched her sleeve with shaking hands, but she did not fall this time. She stood upright, watching through the broken window, watching two monsters fight because of the scars on her arm. Scars she once wished would disappear. Now she realized something important. Those scars were not a sign of her weakness. They were proof that she survived, proof that she endured, and proof that she was worth the fight happening outside. The night was far from over, and Rila's fate was about to shift again. But for the first time she felt something she had not felt in years: hope. The night sky burned red as Drakkar and the Ashkar leader clashed in the center of the ruined street. Their flames lit the broken houses around them. Shadows jumped like frightened animals on every wall. Rila watched through the shattered window of the abandoned house, her heart beating fast, her hands gripping the sides of the broken frame. She was scared, but for the first time she did not feel helpless. Evan stood close behind her, keeping one hand near her shoulder, ready to pull her back if danger came close. Drakkar roared as the enemy leader's blade sliced across his scaled arm. Sparks flew into the night. The Ashkar leader laughed loudly and shouted that Drakkar was wasting his strength on a useless girl. He said Rila was weak, broken, a mistake. The words were meant to stab her heart. But instead something inside her began to rise. Something fierce and burning. She felt tired of being called weak. Tired of being treated like an object. Tired of believing other people's lies about her. Drakkar answered the insult with a blast of fire that shook the sky. The enemy leader blocked it with his burning shield and charged forward. Their clash sent a wave of heat rushing across the entire street, pushing Evan and Rila back inside the house. Evan shielded her with his body. But Drakkar's roar thundered over everything. He shouted that Rila was stronger than anyone who tried to break her. His voice filled the night like a promise and like a warning. The Ashkar clan, seeing their leader fighting alone, rushed forward again, a wave of attackers heading straight toward Drakkar's back. Evan grabbed Rila's hand, ready to run deeper into the house. But before he could pull her away, she stepped forward instead. Her eyes were different now, filled with fire instead of fear. She whispered that she would not hide anymore. Evan stared at her in shock. He tried to stop her, but she slipped from his hand and stepped out of the broken doorway. Her legs shook, but she forced herself forward, stepping into the open street for the first time in the entire fight. Drakkar saw her from the corner of his eye, his face changing from rage to shock for a moment. The Ashkar attackers paused when they saw her too. Some whispered her name like a curse, others like a target, but Rila lifted her voice. A voice she never used before, and she shouted at the Ashkar leader that she was not weak. She shouted that she did not belong to him. She shouted that she survived every mark they burned into her, and she would survive again. The enemy leader turned slowly, his burning eyes locking onto her. He growled that she was nothing, but Rila lifted her arm and showed her scars under the moonlight. She said these were not marks of ownership. These were proof she endured everything they threw at her. She said they tried to break her, but she stood here alive while they hid behind blades and threats. Her voice was trembling but powerful. The street went silent for a moment as even the Ashkar warriors hesitated. And in that silence, Drakkar moved faster than anyone expected. He struck the enemy leader with a blast of fire, so strong the ground cracked beneath them. The Ashkar leader staggered, struggling to stay standing. Drakkar looked at Rila with something almost like pride in his fierce eyes. He roared that her strength was greater than any flame he could summon. The Ashkar leader tried to strike again, but his blow was weak now. His power fading, Drakkar pushed forward with one final strike. A roar that echoed through the night as his fiery claws slashed through the enemy leader's weapon, sending it flying into the air. The Ashkar leader fell to his knees, defeated. The remaining Ashkar warriors saw their leader fall and scattered in fear, running into the dark forests, leaving only silence and the smell of burnt stone behind. Rila watched them flee and felt something heavy lift from her chest for the first time in years. Drakkar turned to her, his huge form glowing from battle. He walked slowly toward her, the fire on his arms fading. He lowered himself and bowed his head in front of her, something no one had ever seen him do. He said she was not a prisoner, not a servant, not a tool. He said she was under his protection, not because she was weak, but because she had shown a strength that even warriors feared. Rila felt tears fill her eyes. Not from sadness this time, but from something warm and overwhelming. Evan walked up beside her. Bruised, tired, but smiling gently, Rila looked at him. And in her eyes there was a new light. She whispered that he saved her when he had no reason to. That he stepped forward when everyone else hid. Evan shook his head and said he only did what was right, and that she deserved someone to stand with her. Drakkar looked between them and nodded, as if giving silent approval to a future they had not yet spoken about. The night slowly calmed. The fire in the sky faded. The battle ended. But Rila's life had changed forever. She was no longer the girl who hid her scars under cloth. She was someone who stood up, someone who fought back, someone who was protected not out of pity, but out of respect. She looked at Dracker, then at Evan, then at her arm. The scars glowed softly under the twin moons. Not marks of pain anymore, but marks of survival. She smiled for the first time in a very long time, a soft, small smile, but real. And in that moment, she knew her fate was not broken. It was only beginning. And this time she would walk forward with people who would never let her fall again.